Okay, welcome. It's been a while, and today I'm so excited to be joined with my special guest, Miranda. It was such a privilege to meet you and have you here. We first had the pleasure of meeting at Terra Talks and the Reignite conference up in Muskoka. And in that moment, we had a chance not to just to see how aligned that our work is, but then like supporting leaders to unlock their full potential and then be able to build those resilient organizations. And the heart of the book, and so a tree still grows. And the work that you're doing is so incredibly important. And why don't you give an opportunity, introduce yourself and tell me more about you?
Well, thank you so much. I mean, this is the beautiful synergies, like you said, reflective of the Reignite event, which was incredibly wonderful to be in nature and to really be able to connect with people, because these things don't usually happen at regular conferences, where you continue the connections that you got to make with people on a personal and professional level, right? So I'm very excited and honored that we got to continue this, and we're both vibing in the same place, which, like you said, is growth and development and leadership work, right? Because that is, to me, the greatest gift you can give yourself and others is when you start to learn more about yourself. And so my work, so you introduced me, Miranda Rocca-Circelli. I've been in this space for probably close to 20 years, just working different, being an entrepreneur, having different businesses, raising 3 children, and the trial and errors of life, and trying to find yourself in the mix of the chaos, right? And just out of my own pain. So I started my company developing curriculum for organizations and transitioning them to online from face to face. And, that was all great, very technical driven. And then I realized, I had my own stuff, my own trauma, my own pain that I had never really looked at, because the world told me, well, if everything on the outside's good, then everything on the inside should be good. So just, resist all the urge to feel depressed or angry or sad, and be perfect and go out there. So, I had kids, I started to realize, the pain points of, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. And if I don't stop to acknowledge some trauma that I'm carrying with me, there's a good chance I'm going to pour that into my kid's cup, and then they're not going to want to have a relationship with me. So it was really, I think, becoming a parent that was probably the greatest pivot point for me. And then using my pain to then create content to support others. And so this has been probably my greatest passion project, where I've had different businesses, but this is really the one that I see the greatest value in sharing. It's like you have this, golden key, and you just want to share it with everyone because it's going to help their lives, right? So and then getting to connect with people like yourself who are in the same space, who see the value in this work, and who've committed and dedicated, your life to this, to helping others. And the reason why I love this field so much is, as much as we're helping others, we can't do that without helping ourselves. And I really believe you can only take people to the depths you're willing to take yourself. And if you're not willing to do that shadow work and really look at your unresolved trauma and your wounds, you really can't be a service to anyone else. And that, goes back to that whole part of, the philanthropic side of giving to others. You really can't fill other people's cups until yours is filled. And I think for me as a mother, that's when I really became aware of how empty my cup was, and how critical it was for me to learn how to fill it with goodness, so that I could pour from that cup. And so whether people are aware or not, whatever's in your cup is going to come out. And so dedicating my life to being hyper aware of what's in my cup, and again, just, coming up with the tools and the processes to help others, it's just been such a rewarding place to be, because every time I help someone, I end up taking myself to a deeper level and create awareness for myself in their experiences. So, I mean, it's such a powerful place, and I'm just so honored that we connected, because the work you're doing, I think, complements so well. We complement our work each other, because as I go out there and consult and coach, you have actual tangible products that people can use, which is a beautiful thing, because as humans, we need tangible products to remind ourselves where we are, where we need to be, and to create that awareness, because that is, if you're self-aware, you're unshakable, So for me, it's so valuable to work with people like you, because you're out there giving people the tools that are tangible, that they can actually look at and implement every day. The inner work isn't as seen, right? It's not as tangible. You can't hold a coaching session and look at it and have it in your hands, but having that complementary piece to help, extrapolate that and expand that piece of that self-growth is so important. So this is really exciting.
Yeah. And what I hear is like you yourself, you're like, I was a tree in a pot. So I broke the pot and wanted to be planted in my own environment that I can stretch out my own roots. And as I hear as well, it's like, well, if the roots are dry and the soil is dry, the water just sips right through. If there's cracks in a pot, it actually can't hold and absorb anything. And it is so very true that our children are these mirrors to us that just show us what work we still need to do. Through my own journey, it was the same thing of like, I don't have any energy. I'm depleted completely. And I have nothing for this little toddler who just wants to play. And that broke my heart. And I hear the same thing. You saw the same thing in yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great, and I love what you're saying about, and the work you do with the comparison to a tree, because we are all connected and we all have the same processes in life in order to get to a place that we can thrive and be abundant. And, I've learned, and you've probably seen this, the study of, if you put a plant in a healthy environment, it thrives and grows, right? And it has all the things it needs, but you put that same plant in an unhealthy environment and it's impacted by that energy. So, I learned sometimes, when you don't have the faculties developed to navigate in a way that is healthy, because I think as you come to these moments of like, as you mentioned, the Ensō and the awareness and the ahas of like, oh, wait a second, then sometimes you don't have the faculties to know what next step to take. And so removing yourself from environments that you feel are not healthy or that you don't have the capacity yet to navigate in a healthy way, it's okay to remove yourself until you can get to a place where now your soil's getting back to where it needs to be. Like you said, like there's repair, and then you can go back into that environment and have the faculties further developed to be able to navigate in a healthier way. But again, just taking care of yourself as a plant and saying, okay, my environment, I just can't manage right now or navigate in a healthy way. Maybe I need to remove myself and put myself into a healthier environment until I can get to the place where I can now assume a role where I'm healthy and I can give from a full cup of goodness.
Yeah, absolutely. And like when the nutrients aren't being absorbed, and when what I hear as well, you recognize in your own self, you're like, I'm not growing here. I'm not growing and I'm not giving back. I have nothing in my cup to pour back to others. And you took that time. When we look at nature, nature is cyclic in nature. And there's a wintering. And so a tree, if it doesn't have the wintering phase, if it's a fruit tree, actually can't produce fruit. Yet we're in these environments that are nonstop productivity. And what I hear is that you came to that point too of like nonstop productivity is not natural in any environment.
No.
And so how do you
taxing.
create that pause and to be able to then let the lessons decompose and create those lessons learned in those aha moments to absorb into your roots so that you can then cultivate fruit, right? What are some of the things that you teach and learn to give for that composting time to get that return on energy?
I've learned that self-preservation is so important. Like you mentioned, like we're in a world where it's go, go, go. And the truth is society encourages the go, go, go. And as much as there's always these campaigns, for mental health and different, proactive means to self-preserve, it's kind of a gaslit society where it's like, we want you to take care of your mental health, but we're not going to support you and give you space. So, if I need a week off, if I was working somewhere and I was like, hey, I need a week off to sit with some unresolved trauma. I need to sit with, my shame, my guilt, my grief. It's not a world that's conducive to supporting that and saying, yeah, sure. You know what? Take a week off. We'll pay you. Go get better. And then come back and reintegrate. It's not like that. If you're still wrong and shamed and re-victimized when you need that space and time. So for me, it's regardless of what the world, and again, the clock doesn't stop, kids' sports still go on, bills still have to be paid. So I've learned to really build that self-preservation and to really take time to sit with my feelings. And I mean, I mean, much like you, like when you're in this industry and you've made a commitment to it, I do this as a lifestyle. This is something I do every single day. And it's not something I would expect most people to do. Most people don't even do this in a lifetime. But because of the landscape that we're in, for me, it's an absolute daily day, like all day, every day. At night, I debrief on my emotional states. I allow myself to feel what wasn't able to feel during the day because of the go, 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 but create space to allow yourself to sit with those feelings. That is the absolute key. And I mean, we can, people take time to do things, exercises and yoga, all that is great and not enough. You have to be willing to literally sit with your pain. If you did something you feel guilty for that day, then sit with the guilt and allow yourself to acknowledge and feel it. And to me, that is the catalyst. You can spend time trying to find the who, what, where, when, how, or you can identify the emotional state and sit with it. And that's the healing you need. And that's, then you squeeze all the juice out of that lemon, it's gone. There might be a whole other bowl coming, and that's the nature of the plant world. And it's beautiful because it continues to abundantly provide. And so if you sit with that, you allow it to heal and it moves through you. And so that's the greatest gift I've been able to give myself, is to create space to sit with my feelings every single day, which I understand is hard. But even if people created a little bit of space to just identify how they felt in a day, I think that's the start of people's, the catalyst to their healing.
Yeah. And the wisdom of the tree too is like, and because I use just a maple tree, Canadian,
Yeah,
very,
no, it's beautiful. Yeah.
very fitting. But the sap that runs through a tree, right? And I use the metaphor of the sap being the emotions, right? Well, if you let this sap build up, it actually gets really hard and the branch gets brittle and it'll break off, right? But if you let it flow freely throughout, it continues to keep the health of the tree. And so if we look at the same thing, the more we suppress our emotions or don't deal with it or look at it directly, then it can still flow freely. And even what I hear from you a little bit is the conscious effort in storing energy intelligently in a way of like having that reservoir, because we know the ebbs and flows of life are going to happen. And do we have that storage of energy and know how to transmute it into our everyday, into action, right?
And that's the part that I think, where, again, the work you're doing, the work I'm doing, that's the piece that people don't have that they need, because we don't know how. I didn't know how to navigate, right? I only knew that I was not happy and things felt disruptive, things felt broken, things felt out of order. And then just feeling, depression, anger, all these things, the sadness. And that's what I knew. I didn't know how to transmute it. And the biggest question I always get asked from clients is, okay, we talk about sitting with your emotions. Most people are like, okay, so how do I do that? And it's a beautiful question, but it also shows us how disconnected, and again, not by choice, society has pushed it upon us to be so disconnected from our emotional states that we don't know what it means to feel emotions anymore. And like you said, if you don't feel them, well, they get denser, they get harder, and eventually they're going to cause damage, and they are the root to all illness and disease, right? So if we don't allow that energy to flow and open up the top, like you're saying, like the more that sap flows, the more rich it becomes, right? And the more nutrients go into it, and the more abundant the experience becomes. So people actually have it backwards. We're told not to feel, but the more you feel, the more connected you become to yourself and the world around you. And that's the richness. That's the nutrients that you can now fill your cup with and pour onto others. But if you turn that tap off, you start to, and literally, my work is much like yours, where we talk about energy and we quantify it. Well, there's an interesting story that many people know of, called Medusa, and it's one of my favorite stories. And the truth is, to that story, the metaphor is that, when someone becomes very much aware and evolved, when people looked at her, they either turned to stone or their vibration increased. And the piece and the caveat there is really, she was a reflection of the truth within people. And so if you looked at her and you're willing to see your truth, you would reach the higher realms and vibrate higher. And if you weren't willing to see your truth and you saw your ugliness, or you didn't want to see the truth and saw it as ugliness, well, you would turn to stone, which is literally, vibrating at such a low frequency that you become so dense that you are literally like a rock. And so back to your tree analogy, it's very similar. Like if you're not willing to see your truth, you can't deny the tree itself. It's part of its process. If you try to deny its flow, it's going to do damage. And so we all have that flow within us that we have to embody and allow. And that's the emotional piece that we're told not to. And so I think your work and my work is really about creating the awareness of like, hey, no, you have these emotions. They're actually tools that are going to either energize you or de-energize you. And you get to choose which one you embody and feel. And that's the power of now controlling the flow of yourself,
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that, of the Medusa and all those ancient stories, folklore of that exists, and they exist. And I almost, if I were to take it into our today world, of that mirroring is that trigger that stiffens us up and puts us into a state of defensiveness and reaction, and that allows us to become very rigid. And all those mirroring metaphors, like you can take them in so many different parallels, just the same. Yeah. And to your point as well, like that emotional state, I had interviewed the founder of emotional training, EITC, David Corey, and as he says, like, okay, well, emotions are all emotions. So in our workplace, we're like, oh, they don't belong here. So we're like, okay, so joy and gratitude and all those aren't welcome. You can't select and choose what you're going to allow in the workplace, but teach the strategies on how to use all of them and to mirror, like in your Italian background, like the Japanese, all of the martial arts and way of being. So Shoto, which is the art of calligraphy, which was the inspiration, all of those disciplines take the emotional state of the individual and blend it so deeply with the craft. And how do you take those emotions into your craft?
Right. And use them as, because the true key to alchemy is when you become so self-aware that, and again, once you understand your depths, and that's why we see great spiritual leaders. They don't wake up and become leaders, right? And most of them had hardships, because when you do walk the path of speaking truth, well, there's a good chance you're going to get crucified or you're going to get stoned, because that is human nature. If we don't understand something, then let's just destroy it, because then we don't have to look at it. And I appreciate the courage that people like yourself and myself, that we're stepping into, to say like, hey, no, actually, you need to feel your feelings, because that's the key to your evolution and to your alchemy, where you can control the energies. If you can't control the energies in the emotional states within yourself, you've not earned the right to attempt to control it in others, because then that becomes manipulation, right? So it's such an important thing that we start to really create spaces for people to connect with, like you said, all emotional states, because there is a spectrum. And, in order to get to the higher emotions, you have to be willing to acknowledge and feel the lower ones. So as much as, it's like often when people are like, well, just be happy, just be happy. And it's like, yeah, okay, it sounds so simple in theory, just choose happiness. But what I've learned is, it's much like when people say, law of attraction doesn't work, right? Well, it's not the truth. The truth is that, first of all, there's layers to it. If you're asking for happiness, first of all, happiness is all around you. And we often look for signs. Signs are all around us. The thing is, often the signs vibrate so high that they're coming to you with joy, peace, and love. But if you're not yet in a place where you resonate at that level, you can't see the happiness. And so you're asking for something that's actually already there, but you're just not seeing it. So what happens is the tone goes up a few notches, right? So it's like, well, you're not seeing the sunshine, which is happiness. You're not seeing, all these things to be grateful for. That's happiness. So let me show you what unhappiness is. So by virtue of polar opposites, you get to see, the depths of the valley, so you can appreciate the view from a top. And so often people get that which they're saying they don't want, but in order for them to see what they do want and resonate with it, you have to feel the pain. And so the pain comes. So often people are like, my whole life fell apart. I asked for happiness and I lost everything. And it's like, well, maybe your ego needed to see it at that frequency to be able to identify with it and say, I don't want this anymore. Now let me be perceptive to the things that are here that resonate with happiness. And that's how you start to elevate and ascend. But ultimately, if you're asking for happiness and you're not happy, there's a good chance you're going to get that what you're vibrating with. So it always works, the pieces that people are not in a place where they are self-aware enough to be able to say, I asked for happiness and all my friends left my life. Well, that probably means because they weren't the path to happiness, and the path to happiness means it's in a different direction, but I was trying to go this way and I'm asking for happiness, but I'm in the wrong direction. So I need to be redirected. And as humans, sometimes that means it has to be traumatic for us to pay attention, because that is where most of us vibrate. So I can appreciate what you're saying, because it's really the key. If you want to be in control of your life, you need to learn about your emotional states and how to connect with them. And then you can ascend to teaching others and, share that knowledge. But until we have that sovereignty, we cannot go outside of ourselves.
Yeah, and that awareness piece is such an important factor. And it comes to mind a couple of things of you become what you tolerate, right? And
Yep.
we're in so many different spaces where we think that this is what we should be doing. And I think Oprah really says it best of like the first 40 years of your life, you're building what you think you should do. But then the next 40 years, you're breaking them down and building them what you know is true. But in that breaking down is hard and difficult and painful.
Yep.
But once you sit with all of that, and as you're saying as well, then letting it compost. And when you let it compost, that becomes such a rich soil for your own growth. Yeah.
But it's like you said, learning that piece of like being able to create the time and space. Because again, like the world won't say, okay, you know what, you need some time to now do just what you said. Like, okay, you've spent half of your life, learning a certain way, and now you have to unlearn it. And most of the time, like, and if you have kids, you're doing this while you're parenting yourself while you're parenting kids. And again, the world does not support that. And it is what it is. It does not support those types of growth and the space. It says that it will, but there's actually no action in the world that says, you know what, you just raise these kids. Now you're raising yourself. Take some time to just figure that out so your compost can turn itself and it could become rich. So we're having to do all that while we also assume the roles of, like you said, all the different things we have to do in this world. And so that becomes incredibly challenging because we're all at max capacity. But ultimately, and again, it's by design, if you don't have time to do that work and to preserve yourself, well, the world knows you're going to be a detriment to everyone, right? But if it gives you the space to build that sovereignty, well, then you become incredibly powerful, because now you're in control of your emotional states and you can impress upon others in a positive way. But that is so challenging to do, because again, it's not supported in the world, right? So it's really hard to, like you said, unlearn and then relearn. And again, I appreciate the tools you have, like everything we can do to help support people, because we need to support people because society doesn't support this path, right? It's more technically driven, and again, this is not the direction that people can easily go into, right? And the other thing is, like, we've been conditioned to accept the bare minimum. Every human being accepts the bare minimum. So that first part of our lives, that's us accepting the bare minimum, because society and the world and the belief systems we carry told us to accept the bare. Oh, you got a job? Well, you got a job. That's great. You're getting paid minimum wage. You could barely survive, but you got a job. So you stick with that job until you're X number of years old, and then you're going to lose your mind because you realize you stuck with something and you were worth more. But that's okay, because now you got like maybe a few years left now that you've retired to like figure it all out, so it's all backwards, right? And so, I think our jobs are so important to remind people that you do not have to accept the bare minimum in life. You accept whatever it is that you choose to accept. And it's going to be based on your belief system. So if you believe you have to work harder, you have to start at the bottom, you will. Now, if you reframe that, and now maybe starting at the bottom looks a little different, right? And now you're not at the bottom, you're actually starting somewhere else because you've reframed that. That's the power. But the world will tell you, accept the bare minimum because that's what you're worth. And I think once people start to develop these faculties and they realize I do no longer have to sacrifice and take the bare minimum. I can actually, there's options and I can choose different and choose what's better for me. And that's the piece I think people really need to sit with it, and where we can support them and say, yeah, that's always an option. You know, it's like holding on to those old clothing, you know, that you want to get rid of, but they're in a bin, and every year you try them on and you're like, still doesn't fit right, but I'm still going to keep you, you know. So at some point we have to realize, like, it's never going to fit you the way it did. Yeah, you could keep it, or you can look at different options and, you know, donate it and replenish it with something, you know, kind of going back to the soil piece and, like you said, the recycling and putting it back into the world. But if it doesn't have nutrients in it, it's not going to give back, right? So we have to really be cautious with how we build that sovereignty, because that's, again, the cup we're pouring from.
Yeah. And what I want to really go into as well is like the work that you're doing and the branches. And so you've done the work, you now have this very clear defining of like where your creativity and where your impact that you want to make. And so you found a little bit more of that sovereignty, you know your purpose a little bit more, right? And so that brings up like that growth of your branches, right? Your community involvement and the work that you do and that impact that you want to make. So when I see the branches, I see of like, what's the canopy that you're growing and who's sitting under it, right? And so how do you extend yourself, your knowledge and your compassion to connect with the wider community outside of your direct consulting work?
So, I mean, I think we do. I mean, I've done that in different capacities. And I think because I've just been able to notably identify when there is a lack of compassion. I mean, I've built projects, I've built a nonprofit to support youth in basketball out of, you know, identifying that there wasn't a safe space, and the space that was there was not safe. And so, you know, having the skill set and being a businesswoman and saying, okay, you know what? I got dragged through the mud for X number of months trying to make something right. And again, just using energy as a toolkit of saying, okay, you know what? There's a lot of energy in anger, you know, and it resonates pretty high. It's still in the lower paradigm, but there's so much anger, like energy to it. So, you know, in that particular situation, it was like, okay, I can allow, you know, this group of men to drag me through the mud because I'm doing something that's creating light, and people who are up to no good sometimes don't like the light, right? And then I thought, okay, well, I could do this, or, you know, I can take this anger and transform it into courage and just build a new league. You know what? Let me build a new league for kids that's safe. Yeah, it's going to take work. It's not that it's a hard process. It's going to be consuming, but I have the faculties developed to do this. So I did that, built this beautiful, and then I ran it for 4 years, and now it's being run. It's nonprofit. It's still being run, and it blew up in an amazing way, creating a safe space for kids. So the way I've been able to use my faculties is, and also being discerning, right? I can't fight every battle. But what I am willing to do is I share my knowledge with everyone and anyone who's willing to listen, because, you know, to me, this is so important, and it is universal law, and it's something that applies. You know, I've read different religious texts over the years, and this is the language that really speaks to everyone when we talk about taking care of what's in your cup, because I want to be able to help others if my cup. And I mean, again, it was an evolution of learning about myself in that too. Like, what am I willing to sacrifice? Where's my tipping point? What's the max point of like, okay, you know what? My cup is so filled with stuff I don't want in it. And I mean, being dragged through the mud, you know, I had lawyers after me just trying to intimidate me. And it was just little old me just kind of like, well, no, this isn't right. So I'm going to keep fighting it. And I did, and it worked out well. So I think for me, it's, I share my knowledge and who I am in every room I walk into unapologetically. And for me, I know I'm coming from a very high energetic place. And so that's how I contribute my services outside of my professional world. And as well as being a mom, I mean, I've chosen to bring children into this world. So for me, I consciously parent them, which means, you know, again, I'm probably creating a whole other generational trauma in sharing this, but my kids are very in tune. Everything I learn, I share with them.
Mhm.
And so when I have lessons, you know, when I deliver content, I have experiences, you know, I share it all with them, because for me, it's like a burning itch. It's like, I have this information, I have this knowledge, I've done the work. So I need to share it with others. And what they choose to do with it is completely, you know, their free will, but I've at least done my part. And so I share my gifts in creating awareness in both the personal and professional realms as much as I can. And again, because it's such a lifestyle for me, it really oozes out of me in every aspect. And so I can't, you know, people say they can compartmentalize. That's really a sophisticated way of saying that you can suppress in increments. And I don't agree with that, because you're one person, it's all intertwined. And so I share my knowledge with everyone. And that is how I share like the work I do.
Yeah, and so all of that fruit, and as I see, like your tree is so nice and strong. You have a very strong presence, and that energy is so powerful. And when you have the courage to just take that unique experience and say, do you know what? I'm gonna get curious. I'm gonna have the courage to take action onto it. And we need more of that as well, because the alternative is, yeah, like it gets suppressed. And if you don't do anything with it, it turns into resentment, right?
And it does. And then it impacts you and it impacts everyone, because now you're seeing life through the lens of being very angry and resentful to the world. So, and as aware of you as you are, if you're not aware that that's the lens that you're coming from, you will do so much. And again, like we walk the path. So it's like, I am aware that when I am not in the right state, I'm not as present for people in my life. And if I can acknowledge that and say, you know what, even with my kids, you know what, this just happened. I'm not really present. I want to be present for you. I just need some space to go feel what I need to feel. And then I will be back. And so there's always permission to feel in my household. And even with clients, it's like, create the space to feel, just acknowledge it. I'm feeling angry right now. Just acknowledging it is sometimes the biggest battle. And then once we acknowledge it, everything else kind of falls into place.
Well, and those feelings are coming from disrupted values. And when we can articulate what our values are, and talk about the values as being your essential root system of being so grounded, right? When other people's values come in and they'll choke out your own values, but when you can see them and speak to them, be so grounded that weather happens, no matter what weather, what scenario, what other people's external factors come across you, you know your values so strongly that they'll hold you no matter what you endure.
Yeah,
And so I
that's
hear that
beautiful.
like so strong of like knowing your values, because you did the work, and protecting them for your kids, so that they learn that their value system, their roots, and those tap roots, and having the courage to recognize when there's an external factor that's going to compromise their own root system.
Yeah. And like you said, the roots. So even taking that even deeper is that, you know, as a tree starting to grow, the roots are small, right? And so it becomes really hard. And again, like we're programmed with these values that aren't even ours before the age of 9, right? So this little tree that's growing is doing its best to form its initial foundational roots, right? And then you put certain trees beside it. Now their roots are going into their roots. And so this little tree is really trying to create landscape and take up space, right? And so the hardest part is that initial foundation. And sometimes it requires us to regrow roots that, you know, that are stronger. But once you get to the point where your roots now are strong and whole, regardless of what tree is planted near you, you have already taken up space and planted your seeds. And so the hardest part, I think, is that initial piece of when you start to just create the awareness and you start to become just paying attention to the things you didn't. That's the hardest part, and where most people give up because of the hardships. But, you know, I always say life is going to be hard regardless. choose your heart. Do you want the heart of conforming and sacrificing and taking the bare minimum? Or do you want the heart of stepping into courage and challenging things? Because either way, you're going to get scrutinized, you're going to be judged, all those things that people worry about, it's going to happen no matter what. So if the outcome, let's say, is going to be the same, and you get to choose the path for which you get there, then choose the happy path. But again, it's not that easy, and look for support and resources that will help support you in choosing that higher path. Because I get it, we don't all know how to do that. And that's the piece that's missing, because we could say, yeah, do this, do that, but people don't know how. So I think that's where our work is so important, because we support people in the how. You know, like, how am I going to get that? Well, this is how you're going to do it. We're going to show you, we're going to provide you tools, we're going to support you and empower you. So now you know how to do it. And now you can go teach someone else how to fish, and they're going to be thriving for life, right?
And when you talk about that, it's like, who do you look to, and who of those leaders? So I use this other metaphor of, like, one, there's a Kensho flock, and what the Kensho flock are the wise owls in your tree. And the wise owls in your tree are ones that you look to of, like, oh, my heart calls to what they're doing. I love what they're doing. That's so, and that was mine. I had an executive coach who was the one who helped me crack the pot. But I looked at him to be like, how you ask those powerful questions in so few words was impressive. And I looked at him, I was like, I want to be able to do that, right? Of just give that mirror of a question that just sparks the curiosity. And with that curiosity builds a little bit of courage to take action. And then with that creates that momentum of confidence, right? So my question to you is when you think of, like, your journey and the wise owls that could have been in your tree, whether they're celebrities or coaches or whatnot, what were some of those really influential ones that, like, cracked the pot and sparked the curiosity root?
I mean, and thank you because I got to remind myself to ask you a follow-up question to what you said about your experience. But before I do that, I will be honest, I have never really looked to anybody in terms of inspiration. And maybe that's just because growing up, I never had anyone there to inspire me. And so what that did do, though, for me is that obviously a lot of pain in times where I needed support, I needed help, I needed all the things that everybody needs when they're going through tough times. And I didn't have any of it. I didn't have a good friend. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have someone that I could look up to. I had to figure it out myself. However, I was fortunate that in one of the roles I had, I connected with a coach. And so that woman was the woman who helped me create awareness for this whole path. And it's usually coaches, not therapists or counselors. And I've obviously worked with all of them, but it's usually the coaches that shake up the system. And that's why I love being a coach, and because it's really empowering people to do the work that we do without needing us. And I say it's like raising kids. My kids shouldn't need me to survive. They should be so autonomous and have the mastery and the skill. They know I'm here to support them. If they have questions, they need love, whatever it is they need, I'm always here. But ultimately, my clients are the same as you. I want to empower you to basically do what I do, if you choose to, right? So you have all the tools. And so I had an exceptional experience, much like it sounds like yours was, with a coach who started to challenge my reality. And what I quickly realized is, like, no one's going to save you but yourself. You need to be able to challenge yourself. You know, it's great to obviously, you know, had she not come into my life, well, you know, my path would have been probably very different. And so I'm very grateful that I had that experience. So for me, much like you, that was probably the greatest pivot point of, like, and Ensō moment of, like, aha, okay, shit, I need to ask myself some questions now. And I mean, it was ugly. It was messy. It was bringing up all the unresolved trauma from my entire life and questioning everything. And my life fell apart so many times in that process that it was like hitting rock bottom over and over again. At least it felt like that. However, I needed to hit rock bottom to realize that I was at rock bottom. And now what am I going to do with this? you know, and so she was in my life for a very short time, but the imprint that she left and the work that we were able to do together has really been the foundation for, you know, my journey in helping others. And so it's interesting because often when people have those pivotal moments, it usually is with a coach, you know, because I think coaches are some coaches, because everyone does call themselves a coach, but I think in the case where people are challenging you to really look at who you are and remember who you are, because you were great before the world got its hands on you, right? So for me, that was probably one. And then I would say the greatest epic moment where it was like, you need to change your path was being a parent. That was like an instant, like, you know, those moments of just losing your mind and not, you know, being sleep deprived, everything deprived. And still trying to have the faculties developed in the capacity to literally just be a parent and create a safe space for your kids was a challenge for me. And so I needed to, I think that was the greatest awakening of like, okay, I don't want to recreate this generational trauma. I need to now remove myself. And then that's when synchronously I had a coach, and then I started to do the work here, there, and everywhere. But I just took that as an opportunity. It's like, if she said one word to me, I was like, okay, hit the ground running. Like I would just do all the work I could to dig that out because I didn't have the time and the money and all that stuff. But I couldn't imagine not having had those moments. So yeah, usually the light comes from the darkness, you know. So I will say like a lot of dark moments have been really the turning point for me in creating the path that I'm on now.
Yeah. And why our society even, because I think there's just such a surge and that judgment really comes in. I come from high performance sport, and we can see a coach to an athlete. We're like, absolutely, you need, like, what athlete's going to go to the Olympics without a coach? None. Right. Yet in our business world, where it is like, and even our life, everything is a game and a path where we are continually growing. Why it's not socially accepted? It's more, and it's changing now. But I'm like, everything is a game, and to have that person to just point out in those spaces,
just a reminder, right?
Just,
that's all we need sometimes.
You cannot see. There are blind spots through, and when we have stress, the blinders come in. We only see what's directly in front of us, and
just someone to nudge you, like you
yeah.
said. Just, hey, look in this direction, just for a minute, if you want. You don't have to stare there, but just look over here and just see. And I think that's, like you said, the critical piece of like, but why isn't this like? And for me, you know, I do a lot of work in like trauma-ridden areas, like medical system, law. And it's like, these are so trauma ridden, yet we're not trauma informed. And we're sending people into the system who are professionals trying to help others, but yet they don't have the toolkits, the resources, or the know-how when it comes to trauma. So it's really interesting. By trauma, I mean like emotional trauma, right? We're still not seeing that. And so I hope we get to a place where people like you and I are mandatory to just help people, because often I'd say 99% of the people, I mean, of course, you probably have to let go of clients as well, which is a horrible thing. And I don't like doing that. But ultimately, it's like, I don't have the magic pill. You do. And I'm going to ask you questions so that you can remember that you're the one who's going to save yourself. And so my follow-up question to you was like, as much your coach was such an inspiration, like, did you get to the place where you feel that you have, you know, embodied that type of behavior or those types of, you know, experiences you had, or did you change it, or like, where are you at with getting to that parameter that you set?
Yeah, no, it's a great reflection back. And as we wrap this up, and mine comes down to aligning the why. So I see things as like your external world and your internal world, and how I started to see this, and that what I was seeking was, and I'll give another, I'm full of metaphors, but aligning your why was really when that intersection of when your inner world and your external world match. And when it's always dynamic, it's never fixed. So it's always dynamic, and it always kind of feel like it's drifting and coming together. And I came across, like, when I was doing the Ensō circle, I was like, oh, it's sort of like, you know, when you like run your finger around a glass And if you get the resonance and the pressure just right, it hums, right? You can feel that tingle of like alignment of energy and that frequency, right? And that's why I was like, that's aligning your why. That's also that Ensō moment of when you can find that alignment where you can just feel that authentic, of like when your thoughts, your actions, your behaviors, everything is aligned, right? And before, my thoughts and my actions and behaviors and my body, what my heart was telling, were so scattered, right? And it was through writing the book that I came so clear to aligning my why. And it took probably 2 years of sitting with to being so clear. And I'm like, yep. And now it's just a knowing, like a deep knowing of what that action and what that alignment looks like. And I not that everybody can, but I actually think I'm like, everybody should go through the process of writing a book. It turns yourself inside out. So then you know
Very
yourself
cathartic,
so clearly.
right?
It is. And so you put yourself back together, like break yourself completely apart, put it back together, and then you're like, okay, that feels right. Right.
And then you can share that, right?
Yeah.
Because we're all walking a very similar path and we all are connected in so many ways that I think that's why, you know, you and I are doing this work. It's because we know, like, if I know how grateful I was for a coach that entered my life for that short period of time because the impact it had on me. So it's kind of like paying it forward of like, if I can help others, you know, and also for me, it's entering the corporate world and also shifting the corporate world and the corporate language and the dynamic and bringing that emotional piece into that world. Because again, it's not separated. It's actually, you know, when I conduct workplace investigations, I see like the other end of the spectrum of where things land, and it's always preventable, but it requires us to be accountable with who we are and how we're showing up, and then to choose to do things differently. You know, so however we could support people in choosing different, I think that is so powerful. And again, I love the work that we're doing. Again, you get this too, you know, you learn so much about yourself every time you engage, like you in this conversation, right? It's like, oh, cool, moments of reflection. I can go back and be like, okay, let me reflect on this and this and this. So there's growth and everything in life. And you mentioned this earlier, whether it's a relationship with someone, with your work, with anything, if something is not feeding you in terms of evolving you or healing you, it's no longer good for you, right? So
Yeah.
and that's
No
hard.
return on energy, right?
Yeah.
If there's no return on
It
energy,
starts to
that
take.
reciprocity. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's so important to pay attention to that.
And Miranda, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story and walking through your journey and sharing so much. Like these are these moments that I find on as I talk, like your experimentation and the ha 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 ha
Yeah.
until you find that aha moment, those beautiful Ensō moments. And your work is a powerful example of how a single seed of passion can then grow into a life-giving tree, and that shelters and strengthens the community around it and leaders alike. So for our listeners, what I really hope is that this conversation has inspired you to look at your own journey and to find the courage to keep growing. And you can grow into a life-giving tree that shelters and strengthens your community around you. So if you're inspired by Miranda and you want to learn more, read the description here in her work in professional development and Empower You leadership. I'll put the link and everything down below, and we'll be sure to give you all those notes. But before I do my send off, is there anything else that you would like to close off?
Thank you for this opportunity, because I think this is the type of stuff that speaks exactly to the work we're doing, which is just, it could just be a conversation as simple as that, and sharing that might create that Ensō moment in someone who's like, again, awareness is just paying attention to something you did not see. And it's just giving that focus to something that you didn't know was even there. And once you see something, you can't unsee it. And so if we've created any kind of awareness in people today, which I'm sure we did, then, you know, I feel fulfilled in that and just being present. So thank you for this opportunity to share our work with more people, because again, we're not just sharing work, we're sharing energy with the anticipation and the goal to help raise people up And the bonus is we get to raise ourselves up as well. And of course, it comes with a little bit of pain of doing the work, but I wouldn't want it any other way. So thank you for this opportunity. And I can't wait to continue to chat and collaborate and just share all the good stuff that we're doing with the world.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you go and work out, you don't question the pain that you do in muscle pain, right? And
Right,
so
you just do it, and it's
you
your
just do it.
lifestyle. So
Yeah,
this is the
and
same
so
thing.
same sort of thing of like with pain becomes results. And so, I mean, that return on energy and that reciprocity is so excellent. So
It's
thank you
everything.
all. Yes. Thank you all for listening to Ensō Tell Me More. And if you enjoyed our conversation, please subscribe, share it with someone that you know who might need to hear it today. And until next time, a tree still grows.
Thank you.